Hey, AfterBuzz TV fans, we are here to talk about Surviving R. Kelly, Episode 1, Season 2. We're talking about his childhood trauma, the interviews with his brothers. We're talking about the fight between his girlfriends right now. All of that when we return.
I'm Maria Menounos, and you're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Hey guys, we are back. It is season 2. Can you believe this came full circle into a season 2 of R. Kelly shenanigans? We're talking Surviving R. Kelly, season 2, episode 1. And please, I need a moment to just breathe because I am deeply moved by this particular episode. So my name is Angel Taylor. I will be your host, and I have my beautiful panelist here. She is a former R. Kelly fanatic turned mute R. Kelly supporter.
Yes, I am. My name is Jocelyn Jovan, and I'm so happy to be here because this was a lot.
Yeah.
We didn't really expect it to turn into a part 2, but after watching the first episode of season 2, and then everything that just happened, it's like there could be a part 3, because the story just kind of keeps unraveling and unraveling.
Yes, everything is just unfolding. What were your overall thoughts about this particular episode?
Well, definitely just the more in depth they went about his childhood.
Yes.
And you could get the sense of that, just the different sides from both of his brothers. And, I know we'll touch on that too later.
Absolutely. So it was one of those things that caught me off guard when I saw the interviews with his brother. Bruce came out first, and he was in jail. And you really get a sense of, like, there is a real brotherhood, Jackson 5 upbringing that they had.
Yeah, because they started with the music together. And you can tell they're exactly who they are. Bruce is his older brother. And you hear that in his voice. You hear that in how he speaks about his younger brother.
Very protective,
Very protective of him. And that was, something for me to see, like, wow, because I come from a big family. My mom has 6 kids. And
wow.
Yeah. So it's like, and I have 3 brothers, and they've done some crazy things. And it's like, despite no matter how crazy it is, it's like, that's still my brother.
Absolutely.
And there's this sense of like a protection I feel towards them, no matter the craziness they could do. And that's what I saw from Bruce as the older brother. You did get a sense of the youngest brother, Carey, kind of just saying what it is, like speaking out against the injustices that had happened to them as children, whereas the oldest brother was still protecting his brother.
I was very relieved during both interviews with both Carey and Bruce that they weren't not necessarily giving excuses for their brother's behavior. Yes. They were explaining the history of it and not trying to excuse his behavior, because several times it was mentioned he needs help. And they were giving us a touch of what it felt like to kind of empathize with R. Kelly and his need for help and crying out and having a pastor come and really sit in on his issues with his childhood and him knowing that he has perverted thoughts and perverted behavior and he needs to be delivered.
Right. Because it's like, when I was watching that scene, I started thinking of his music, because it was like that was always what he used to get criticized for before we knew about all these things. It was like, oh, how 1 minute you're dropping panties, and then the next minute it's Jesus, Jesus, Jesus.
Yes.
I wish. So when his brother told that story, it's like, wow, this is who he really is.
Dual personalities.
Then when he would describe R. Kelly as another person.
In third person. That man is a dangerous man. That man is a fool.
I was
like, wow, that was one of those moments where you connected the dots and you could understand, like, this is a mental illness happening and unfolding, and it just came out in such a sexual way, pretty much. But like, he's been needing help since since he was 8 or 6,
like 7, 8. It started at a young age,
very young age,
even with the younger brother. So, and let's not act like, for me growing up, I remember it was such a normal thing from back in the day, like in the 70s and 80s or whatever, that for me growing up in the 90s, my mother, she would be like, you better tell me if anyone ever touches you. Don't let anyone touch you. But talking to like my mom, some other older family members, like family friends, it was like not normalized, but it was kind of normal. Like a lot of people got touched as children back in the day.
It was normal where you came up?
I mean, not where I came up, but I know a lot of people, particularly within the Black community. I have cousins. I have like fake aunts, you know what I'm saying? Fake uncles, people who would kind of come over and you could hear stories that would say, or even like my grandmother shared stories with me of things that happened to her and how when she would tell her mom, sometimes her mom didn't believe her. That was like a common thing that I would hear among older adults growing up.
I totally get where you're coming from because every time I would like go to a homegirl's house, my grandma hated when I would do sleepovers or go to parties or anything like that. And whenever I came over her house and she noticed me being quiet or kind of standoffish, she would be like, baby, did anybody touch you?
Wow.
Like, it was one of those things where it's like, no, nobody touched me. I'm just in my zone
But
right
you have
now.
to understand where that comes from. That's what I'm saying. Like, it
absolutely.
was like, I'm saying, like, I'm not saying that it has never happened to me. But I know it's happened to people within my family that are older. Like, they were all growing up in, like, the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And 80s. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, I would feel like by the 90s, maybe people started being like, hey, you better speak up. You know, but another thing that kind of stood out to me from his brother Bruce is when, you know, it like, because when you said the comment, like they weren't making excuses, like, no, he didn't necessarily make an excuse for him. But when he tried to go along the lines of saying, you know, to have everything and for it to all be taken. And
I know. I'm like, wait a minute, where are you going with this?
How low, that's the worst. And I'm like, you mean like being forced into basically a sex slave?
Yes.
And getting urinated on and having sex with minors or being a minor and having sex. It's like, what do you mean?
Yes.
And I can only take your word for so much because you're wearing an orange jumpsuit, brother. You know what I'm saying? It was just like, that was like a bit warped to me when he had the nerve to try to make it seem like R. Kelly's gone through the worst thing ever right now.
Well, that's because, you know, he's biased, obviously, and he's empathizing with all of these stories that his brother's telling him.
Right.
And speaking of stories, how did it make you feel? My overall thoughts about this episode was, it was very melancholy, and there was a lot of poignant moments where I was like, man, like I didn't actually hate him because I was able to understand the history. And it's not that I'm excusing it. I'm like, oh, okay, like the light bulb went off. Like I know about him being molested, but I didn't hear these personal anecdotes, like these actual stories from his brothers and what they all went through. And this relative that they kept on trying to like blank out so you wouldn't hear the name, trying to protect their sister.
Yeah, because I mean, they were still protecting her in the first season. They didn't really say her name, but it came out because the youngest brother, Carey, was just being honest. So it was a little funny so I'm not sure exactly if they said her name in the first one or if I saw it in the blogs, but it was confirmed that it was the sister they were talking about. So then for it to be in the second one where they're just keeping her name out, it's like, wow, you guys are really protecting the sister.
Yeah.
And it must have been at their request, I would assume so.
Do you know how much older the sister was?
No, remember he said, he said in there, the oldest brother, remember
he was
like,
said, she was our age, but she was
probably
little older.
Just a couple of years difference. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's crazy.
So take me to the thoughts that was running through your mind when you heard the Mr. Henry story. When R. Kelly was 6.
Well, yeah, because I'm thinking in my mind from the season 1 where we knew that it was the sister. So now hearing the Mr. Henry story, I'm like, damn, like he was getting molested and sexually assaulted by more than one person as a child.
Right.
I just can't even imagine what that feels like, you know? So it did give me a little bit of a sense of understanding on maybe how heartless and why he's so heartless and cold, because to do the things that he does to women, to young girls, you have to be a heartless, cold person.
Right.
There has to be a part of you that just has no emotion at all.
Right.
And
an inability to empathize.
And that probably was
and
taken.
And the compassion is gone.
It probably was taken from him as a child. Mm-hmm. So then there's just two sides of him, you know, and then when you're hearing his brothers talk about how quiet he was growing up, it's like, you got to think, like, you don't even know what he was holding on to from just a young age and then having to carry that. But it's still hard for me. Yes, I empathize for anyone who goes through that as a child, you know, any kind of trauma, you know, as an adult, whoever, somebody taking advantage of you, it's horrible. But at the same time, it's like he still knew what he was doing was wrong. And he just kept doing it. And then on top of that, lying about it. It's like, at what point were you ever going to really stop?
Right.
And just go.
Until you got caught.
Right.
And even still.
Because I think if he would have even stopped after the P tape, which that happened when I was in high school.
The P tape.
It was. I remember in high school, everybody was talking about that.
Hashtag P tape, right?
Hashtag P tape. And if he would have stopped then, which that was the early 2000s, he all the charges were dropped, whatever. They didn't convict him in 2008. So if you would have stopped then, if you would have used that as like all right.
Lesson learned.
This is my sign from God.
I won't do it again.
I think from there, what could have possibly happened is still all of it would have started to come out, you know, because what's done in the dark always comes to the light. But I think that within that time, he could have made a different image for himself, that more people would be willing to defend him and be on his side. But now it's like you have such a big amount of people who don't defend him, and then a little tiny group of people who are defending him, as we also saw in episode 1.
Absolutely. Before we jump into our next heavy subject, Jerusalem would like to share something with you viewers.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for making AfterBuzz TV the ESPN of TV talk.
Whoop, whoop.
And we just want to let you know to like, subscribe, comment below, subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play, whatever streaming platforms you use, and keep
5
tuning in.
stars on iTunes.
Yes.
Thumbs up.
All
on YouTube. Subscribe.
Show us love.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Jocelyn.
No problem.
So the next thing I wanted to get into was this little team he has around him, protecting him and defending him.
Right.
He has a little army.
He does.
And we saw two sisters, and they were his managers.
Right.
And oh my gosh, take me through your thoughts when they were saying basically that these women are lying and defending this whole ghost account that they have called Surviving Lies. Which is basically posting nudes of the survivors, which actually proves that R. Kelly did do something with them. The fact that he has the footage and able to expose them and exploit them.
Only like someone who's slow, which we know that he is because he can't read or write, would think that you can...
Shots fired!
Like, no, let's just put it where it's at. Only someone who has some kind of learning disability would think that putting out,
I'm innocent, but I got your sex tape,
and I'm gonna put it out,
right?
And you got proof that I sent you these threats, but nobody's gonna know. Like, seriously, like, and then everyone around him. So what I thought of the two white women, and I'm gonna say that because I have two different comments that kind of goes to the level. So for one, it was very striking, of course, that the only two white people in this episode are two white women that are defending him, and you know, there's always talk of, you know, even the fact that it took this long for him to get caught, where people are saying it's because these are black women that this was happening to.
He got caught a long time ago. They're just now doing something about it. And let's be clear about that. We've been knowing about this for ages, like since Aaliyah.
All right, so why did he get away with it
soul.
Right, so why did he get away with it for so long?
Because now we're in this age of social media and speaking out and women empowerment, and we are stronger as a culture to stand against this type of abuse.
Right.
But they were turning a blind eye to it.
And many people say the reason people were turning a blind eye is because it was primarily black women. And when you talk about those debates, just like even right now, we're still going through an epidemic of sex trafficking and transgender women, Black transgender women being murdered. And it's not highly publicized in the media. And there is talk among the Black community that the reason a lot of these things get ignored and not highlighted in publicity is because they're Black. So when I as a Black woman, keeping that in mind, and then I see two white women now calling a large group of Black women liars.
All of them.
It was just, that was crazy to me. And then in addition to, you know, how history where people always say like, you know, people will believe the word of a white woman. You know, a white woman could cry wolf and everyone's like, oh my gosh, help her. So to now then see these two white women doing the exact opposite and instead defending the wolf, it was so crazy to me. I was just like, wow. Because at first, when they first popped on the screen, I was like, oh, he's definitely going down. Now they got some stories on him too. But they were sitting there defending him and they're like,
You thought they were victims.
Not victims. I thought they were going to say what they saw while working with him.
Got you.
But when they were like, we never saw a thing and these women are lying. And it's like, really, like, it just... And it didn't even sound authentic.
They're on his payroll first off. Why are you even giving a testimony?
Because I feel like he paid them and he felt like, oh yeah, get the two white girls, pay them, and have them go and do this documentary and defend me. That's because
there's something about having Caucasian testimony, right? Like, if ever we hear something and it came from someone white, we're like, oh, that must be the truth because this is accredited because it came from a white person.
Right. And it's like, again, it gives you a look into his weird mind, like his weird... I don't want to call him names, but sometimes it's like you want to call him names because it's like, I can't for sure say these girls are telling the truth, but I can't for sure say they're lying either. And it's just too many of them with similar stories to say that they're lying. So I'm going to say he's lying. Right. And it's disgusting.
So this particular episode focused on Faith Rogers, one of his victims, and everything she went through, trying to speak out for herself. She brought in her lawyer, Gloria Allred, very popular defender. And all of his victims, they are getting threatened, harassed. They're paranoid. They have to move. Their lives are turned upside down from supporters of R. Kelly. And there's no going back from this point. They will always be remembered as one of his victims. And how would that, like, can you figure out how you would be a day in the life of someone like Faith Rogers? I mean, her father was a pastor, for crying out loud. Like, she was supposed to be the role model daughter. And it really resonated with me when she says, not only is she now depressed, but just being around her family and how she stopped going to church. She's too ashamed to stand up as his daughter because she lied and she basically humiliated the entire family. And she's wearing that cloak of shame and disdain every day. And she's having these constant reminders on social media and out here in the world, at stores, his other victim.
I would say that
her child, she has to run away from a store at the mall because her life is in danger. Her child's life is in danger because of them being able to speak out for themselves and having other people like who defend R. Kelly at their throats 24/7.
People are crazy, but for her, I definitely, if she's not already, she should, get therapy. Try Reiki.
Try who?
Reiki. I believe in. I like Reiki. It's like an energy cleanse.
Oh, okay. I thought it was a person.
No. It's a form of therapy and spiritual healing.
Okay.
Because she needs deep rooted treatment. And mental, psychological, emotional, spiritual. And with her saying the things of how insecure she feels now around her family and just everything, it gave me a sense of what insecurity she might have already been feeling that allowed her to entertain that situation after she already saw the shakiness of it, to still continue to kind of date him or see him.
She said she was sheltered, and that's typically what happens. A preacher's child is typically in the neighborhood one of the worst one in school.
I know, and I hope they learn that too. I'm sure the parents learn that too. Like, sheltering doesn't really solve the problem. You know, it really doesn't. Like I was saying, my mom has 6 kids, and with my 2 older sisters, she was so strict with them, and they both ended up becoming teen moms. And so with me, she just was a little bit more of like a friend to me. Relaxed. And she just let me know, just Jocelyn, please don't get pregnant. And I still haven't got pregnant to this day. But it's like,
now she's like, what's taking you so long?
Yeah,
you have babies?
Right. But I would say that for parents like Faith Rogers' parents, I hope they could look at their story and see and try to switch things up if you're being too strict and sheltered with your children, because it never solves anything. You make them more curious to learn what is out there and experiment.
So we're going to march right into our special segments, the most shocking moments. And the most shocking moment for me was when the 2 ladies defended his acts with all of the proof and all of the evidence that you could ever muster up against R. Kelly. And they're still calling the victims liars. That was one of my most shocking moments.
Yeah.
What was yours,
I think a lot
Jocelyn?
of people would agree with you. For me, it was that scene I mentioned earlier where the oldest brother, Bruce, kind of explained R. Kelly's current situation and said, like, this is hands down the worst thing that could happen to someone. And I just couldn't believe he had the nerve to say that out of his face.
Yeah.
And when you know for a fact that your brother has done this to all these women, so what do you mean? How is that not horrible? Freaking Andrea Kelly was knocking on the door asking if she could go to the bathroom.
Yes.
That's a hot ass mess. So, I don't know. I don't know. That was the most shocking to me. But also what else was shocking to me, not shocking, but it was interesting to see just how many more people now feel comfortable speaking up after the first documentary came out. You can see Angela Yee's in part 2 now, Damon Dash. It's just interesting, like, okay, now after the first one came out and everyone's now bashing R. Kelly, now everybody's feeling more comfortable to appear in this second one and speak out against it. That was a little funny.
It was a nice twist to see Aaliyah's fiance, Damon Dash, in the interviews. And he's like, if he did that to my daughter, he's dead. Like, there is no sympathy, there's no forgiveness. He's dead. So that was really interesting because you forget that him and Aaliyah were engaged at the time of her death, and how he must have felt about R. Kelly, his strong feelings towards that particular person. And then all of this drama happening. When his fiance, Aaliyah, she was one of the first stories we heard about with him messing with, underage women. And it was different back then, so whatever. So that's why it was interesting to see that Damon Dash is in this one and he wasn't in the first one. Just because they did talk a lot about the Aaliyah relationship in the first one. So we'll see if, when that part comes up, if they're going to give different information. Because, a lot of it, that's why I'm still wondering, like, okay, where is it going to go with this second one? Because they gave so much information in part 1. Yes.
So it's like, what else? What else is there?
Oh, speaking of what else, guys, Jocelyn has our news and gossip, honey.
Well, I mean, the news and gossip is all over town.
Yes.
So yesterday, it went down if you can remember, after part 1 came out, 2 of R. Kelly's current girlfriends appeared on Good Morning America, Azriel Curry and Joycelyn Savage. And they were defending R. Kelly. They were saying all of the allegations are false. Everybody in the documentary is a liar. Well, speed up to a little less than a year later. And they're fighting. And now Azriel is saying R. Kelly is a liar. He's been lying from day one. She called out Joycelyn for sleeping with a minor, and that minor was me. Speaking of, meaning Azriel.
News you can use.
Yes, and they were physically fighting on Instagram Live. We also saw Azriel giving her police report to the police on live, and it seems as though Azriel is breaking out of the Pied Piper's trance.
Right.
And it leaves everybody questioning why. What led to her change in this situation? Because just a couple of months ago, she was defending him.
Oh, yes. She was the main spokesperson in that interview.
Her and Joycelyn, right. And so pretty much what we're seeing in the video and what she's saying in that police report is, once she started saying, like, you know, Joycelyn, you slept with a minor and the minor was me, that's when Joycelyn just started attacking her. We can see it in the video. Joycelyn saying, you're so evil. And she's like, how am I evil? I need to protect myself. And so Azriel's in the process of moving out of R. Kelly's house. Like, oh, take his Grammys or whatever. And it's like, what is happening? And this all happened on R. Kelly's birthday.
Yes, while he's in jail.
Talk about karma. Oh
my gosh.
What's done in the dark always comes to light.
Absolutely. Speaking of darkness, we're in the dark about where this is going, so we're going into predictions right now.
AfterBuzz TV predictions.
So, my prediction, with all of this scandalosity happening, all of this live and all of these fights and things going on, I simply don't know where it's going, but I think that, as Jocelyn said, whatever's done in the dark is going to come to light, and it's coming to a head right now. Azriel Clary is definitely sounding off right now, and I don't think she will be backpedaling at this point. This is the point of no return. She's moved out of his house. She's gotten into it with their girlfriend, hers and R. Kelly's girlfriend, Joycelyn, and shit's about to hit the fan.
Right. I think that now, after what just happened with the fight with Azriel and Joycelyn, R. Kelly still denying the allegations. Then, you know, other news that came out that I'm not sure if it's in this one, if when one of the security guards or former manager admitted that he got the fake ID for Aaliyah during the marriage. So I think it could also lead to a part 3 of this, because there's still so much unfurling with this story, because he has so many skeletons. He made so many tapes. He's had so many encounters with girls who are now women who can tell their truth. He
should have been, like, he missed his calling. He should have been like a director for pornos.
Right.
Or he should have been a journalist, because he likes to journal all of his bad behavior. That is crazy. Who does that?
Psychotics, criminals.
I cannot wait to see what happens in episode 2 next week.
I'm excited.
We're going to be talking about it. We're going to have a full panel next week, so please tune in. My name is Angel Taylor. I've been your host. And where can we find... Oh, you can actually find me on Instagram at Angel Taylor _. You can find me on Twitter, Angel Taylor _. You can find me on Facebook, Angel Taylor. Where can we find you, Jocelyn?
You can find me on Instagram at Jeroslyn Diva, JEROSLYN Diva. And Twitter too, just add 08 to the end, because the last one got hacked.
Oh my gosh. Okay, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Our founder, Kevin Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.